has 57 cleats. Each one of those cleats weighs 1 ton. It has no reverse gear. It has to go frontwards. You have a driver's cab right here on the corner. You have another one on the opposite corner, so when I want to change direction, take them out of this one, put them into the other one. Now see the guys that walk in front of it? They walk in front of it to make sure everything's going okay. You got some on the other side, you got some on this side. Everybody wave. Is you busy paying attention? And notice how the front
has begun yet another transformation. Commercial developer SpaceX is modifying the pad to launch a larger version of their Falcon 9 rocket.
Thank you very much. How you all doing today? South Carolina, huh? Well, you guys came a long way, but we appreciate you being here. I'm Mark Smith. I'm here representing NASA, and I'm going to introduce our astronaut. He's the real deal. Just to let you know, he's from Ohio originally, and he went to the Navy Academy because he ended up being in the United States Marine Corps, and the Navy and Marine Corps are pretty close. So he ended up being a fighter pilot in Vietnam, and he flew fighter jets in the war in Vietnam. So that's his background there with that. He's also an engineer. He's got engineering degrees too. So he's done a lot of things. And then he ended up being in NASA, and NASA brought him in, and he became an astronaut in 1980, and he ended up on 2 space shuttle missions, 2 different space shuttle missions. So he's the real deal. And here he is, NASA astronaut Bob Springer.
Let's see, my brother owns a house out on Kalawasi Island. So I know that area pretty well up there. So I've been up there more than a few times. So welcome to Kennedy Space Center. What I'm going to do is, as Mark mentioned, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the space program. Now, I hope everybody understands that I flew the space shuttle. So no, I didn't walk on the moon or any of that. I flew twice in space, once aboard the Space Shuttle Discovery, once aboard the Space Shuttle Atlantis. And I did that quite a few years ago, back in 1989 and 1990. And we continued flying the Space Shuttle until 2011. And that's about a little over 5 years ago. And then we retired the Space Shuttle. So we're no longer flying the Space Shuttle into space. We're still selecting astronauts. And so just in case there's 1 or 2 budding astronauts in the crowd, we're still selecting astronauts. In fact, we're actually going through a selection process right now. I suspect that sometime in the next couple of months, we will actually hear who the next group of astronauts are going to be. Now, when I applied for the program way back in the 1970s, we had the largest number of people apply for the astronaut program. 8,000 of us applied for the program. They selected 19 of us. This year, when the announcement was made, there were 18,300 people that applied for the program. They're going to probably pick somewhere between 10 and 12 astronauts. Criteria hasn't changed much. You still must have a 4-year degree, a Bachelor of Science degree in a technical field. I'm sure some of you in the audience will recognize what we call STEM, Science, Technology, Engineering, Math. So you have to be in the STEM curriculum. Now, there's nothing against art, music, literature, all those other fields that are out there, but this is rocket science, and having a technical degree is important. During the shuttle program, because we had such an emphasis on flying the shuttle, and you only have to think about how complex the shuttle was. It launches like a rocket, flies in space like a spaceship, comes back and lands more or less like a conventional airplane. So incredibly complex, with a lot more flying qualities than the next generation of spacecraft we're going to fly. So as a pilot, you had to have a minimum of 1,000 hours of single pilot jet time. You'd be a graduate of the military test pilot school. I got to fly a bunch of different jets. In fact, not only did my brother live in Colorado Island, but I was actually stationed in Beaufort for about 2 years. So I flew F-4s out of Beaufort for a couple of years. So I know the low country pretty well and enjoy that part of the country very much, as a matter of fact. So I applied for the astronaut program back in the late 1970s. And again, you had to have the criteria. Minimum bachelor of science degree. Today, NASA is recommending that in addition to an undergraduate degree, you have one or more graduate degrees in technical fields as well. So it turns out I have graduate degrees in math and engineering, so I met that criteria as well. So we're continuing to select people for the program, and we'll continue to do that at a time. But again, a lot more emphasis on the science and math and technology. So if you're interested in that, you better be doing well in school. It's really hitting those books pretty hard. So a very, very important part of it. By the way, you didn't have to be in the military, and you don't have to be a pilot to be an astronaut. 50% of us are military, 50% not, 50% pilots, and 50% not. And of course, we made one other big change when we started selecting astronauts uniquely for the space shuttle program. Anybody know what that was? Selected women for the first time. You got to remember, in the earlier programs, Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo, there were no female astronauts. And so when we started selecting astronauts for the space shuttle program, selected that first class, we had 6 women astronauts, and 6 at that time, about 60 astronauts, for women astronauts up there in various parts of the program. So lots of different changes. Now, when you do go through that selection process and you start training, your first training is very, very generalized. You learn a little bit about all different aspects of spaceflight because there is no one what we call preeminent field. A lot of times I have somebody ask me, if I want to be an astronaut, should I study physics? Should I study chemistry? What? Aeronautical engineering? It doesn't make any difference so long as it's in that technical arena. Medical doctor is included in there. And in fact, one of the things I like to tell young people, when you look at what you want to do in a career field, what do you enjoy doing? Do you like math and science? Let's stick with math and science. Do you like something else? Go with what because if you like something, guess what? You're probably going to be really good at it. So that's very, very important, and I think that holds true. So again, we're continuing to select people for that, and we will continue doing that in the years ahead. The one other difference that we're going to have is that as we're looking to the future, because we really are looking perhaps maybe 10, perhaps as much as 20 years in the future in putting humans on Mars, we're looking for people that we have what we call expeditionary experience. That means the big reason for that is, given the technology we have today, we're going to go to Mars. You ready for this? 6 months to get there, a year on Mars, and then 6 months to get back. So it's going to be a lot of challenges about living in relative isolation for long periods of time. Where could you do that here on Earth? You might think about an area here on Earth where you could do that. You may not know about it. We got an answer, man? Go ahead. What do you think? Antarctica? Yes, you're absolutely right, as a matter of fact. That is the best answer I've ever had on that, because we send people down to live under the solar ice pack for 10 months out of the year in pretty much isolation. So that's a good analogy. There are some other areas that do that. So that's very important. Now, again, once you start training for your space flight, again, first couple of years, everybody takes the same kind of things. You learn a little bit about the shuttle, but you learn a lot of different subjects associated with the space program. Orbital mechanics, the physics of space flight, some human physiology, what happens to the human body in space. Some interesting things take place when you're up there in space. Did you know you grow when you're in space? Well, not really grow, but your spine expands. Think about that. When you're in the weightless conditions of space, gravity's not compressing your spine the way it does here on Earth. And so for the time that you're in space, I grew 1 3/4 inches. Now, as soon as I came back down to Earth and got back into the gravity of Earth, I went right back to my normal size. So there's no problem there. So you don't think about making the basketball team because you're going in space. But those are some of the things. Some of the other things that we're looking at is exposure to gamma radiation from deep space, which is a real problem, particularly if you're going to have a 6-month journey to Mars. So there are a variety of problems up there. Probably the biggest one that all of the space you go into space. The shorter time you're in space, the easier this is, but for the the long duration, people are now spending up to a year on the International Space Station. Everybody who spends time, that long a period of time in space, must exercise to maintain both their muscular as well as their cardiovascular fitness. So how many people in the room exercise 2.5 hours a day? Hard exercise, 2.5 hours. You're dreaming. Anyway, that's what astronauts and cosmonauts on the International Space Station have to do in order to maintain both their muscular as well as cardiovascular fitness. Oh, by the way, you sweat in space the same way you sweat here on Earth. So at the end of your 2.5 hours of exercise, you jump in and take a nice hot shower. Oh, don't even think about it. There are no showers up there. Water is very, very precious, so the best you can do is a sponge bath. So lots of different things you have to learn. When you get through that initial education process, you're eligible to get selected for a crew. My first crew assignment came in 1983, about 3 years after I was selected for the program. I was supposed to fly in March of 1986. Of course, we had the Challenger accident in January of that year. The whole program shut down. And then as we reconstituted some 30 months later, I finally got to fly on Discovery with my 4 other crew members in March of 1989. Turned right around after that to a second flight. Kind of a unique mission on the Space Shuttle Atlantis. You guys been over to see Atlantis yet, or are you going to do that tonight? Okay, to see okay. That's my spaceship. Well, when I'm here, at least, it's my spaceship. So very, very unique, and you'll really, really enjoy the opportunity to get in there and see what that vehicle looks like. Just to give you a heads up on it, when we Atlantis was the last flight, STS-135, very, very last flight flown for the program. We took out all the toxic fuels and things like that, but we preserved it in exactly the condition that we returned from space. So if you look at it and say it's got some smudge marks, a little dirt here and there, yep, that's exactly the way it came back from space. And it makes it kind of unique. So my second flight is actually a night launch on Atlantis. Also kind of a unique mission. It's what we call one of a handful of Department of Defense classified missions. NASA and the Department of Defense worked together for a while, and this was one of those flights. And I can tell you we deployed the satellite, and that's where that story stops. That satellite was classified in 1990, still classified today, but a very, very unique mission. Now we spent a lot of time inside the cockpit, and to appreciate the complexity of the cockpit up there, what you're looking at is over 3,000 instruments, gauges, computer displays, and all that. Why? The shuttle is incredibly complex. Remember, it launches like a rocket, flies in space like a spaceship, comes back and lands like an airplane. Almost 3 million parts. Incredibly complex, 3 million parts. Inside the cockpit, like again, close to 3,000 switches and gauges. And you not only have to know how all that equipment works when everything's going right, but think about it. If you had a machine that was so complex, 3 million parts, what do you think the chances are that one of those 3 million parts is going to fail? It's actually a very, very high probability. So when we learn to fly the shuttle, flying's kind of a funny way to talk about it because actually the computers are doing the flying for us. I bet you didn't know that. When we lift off, it's actually the computers that are doing the flying. The only time we take over and fly manually is during the landing phase. But the rest of the time the computers are doing it. So our job inside the cockpit is to know how all those 3,000 switches, gauges, and instruments work, not only when everything is going right, but if things start to fail, we have to be prepared to do that. So hundreds and hundreds of hours, not only learning all the technical things, but more importantly, the teamwork, the coordination, the communication, working together to make sure that everything turns out right. The cockpit that we have down here in the lower right-hand corner is the upgraded version. In the 1990s, we actually took out some of those 1970s technology and instruments and gauges and replaced them with the 1990s technology and improved the computers along the way. Computers were a big sore point because, again, this was on the drawing board in the 1970s. Some of the adults may remember what computer technology was like in the 70s. They might have a Commodore 64. That was about as good as it got for computer technology. Today, everybody in the audience probably has a cell phone that's got a minimum of 16 gigabytes of memory on board. So things have changed a bit over time. Hundreds and hundreds of hours in there learning all the different things that you can do and being able to do that very quickly. Remember, when you're lifting off a 5 million pound vehicle, 7 million pounds of force, as you clear the top of the control tower during launch, you're already going 100 miles per hour, pushed back into your seat with 3 times the force of gravity. So very, very dynamic environment, and you've got to problem solve all that's going on. Now, I got to do one of the more unique parts of training for spaceflight, training to do a spacewalk or EV. Probably the most physically demanding part of the program, and the reason why is that suit that you see me getting into there. That suit weighs about 300 pounds. Why so complex? Well, you're going to go outside the space shuttle, in my case, into the vacuum of space, no air to breathe, temperatures that range from plus 200 to minus 200 degrees Fahrenheit. You're not only going to survive in that environment, but do up to 8 hours of useful work. So very, very complex suit to enable you to do that. We train for it in what we call our neutral buoyancy laboratory, a big water tank where we use the neutral buoyancy of the water to simulate the effects of weightless conditions in space. And we train like we're going to fly, so if we're going to plan to do an 8-hour spacewalk, 2 of us working together, neutrally buoyant inside the water. That water tank is big enough to have a full-scale mock-up of the shuttle in the water tank as well. And what they do is they make the tools and everything like that, neutrally buoyant. Is it zero gravity? No. You're still not weightless. You only get weightless when you're in space. If you wonder why I'm not smiling over here at the end of the day, you jump in your swimming pool with a 300-pound weight and drag it back and forth for 8 hours or so. You'll understand what I'm talking about. As it turns out, the actual spacewalk is easier. Why? Well, you're weightless. So you got 300 pounds mass, but no weight. So the actual spacewalk is a little bit easier. The other challenging point of learning the shuttle and unique to the shuttle program was being able to fly the orbiter. Now, again, remember that during most of the flight, we're letting the computers doing the flying for us. We have never fully trusted the computers during the landing phase. So starting about 30,000 feet, we take over and fly manually, but it's a very, very demanding task. To understand that, let me compare flying the shuttle to flying a commercial airplane. I'm going to guess that most of you have been on an airplane at some point in time in your life. When you're coming in for a landing on an airline, you're actually coming in a fairly generous glide slope, about a 3-degree glide slope, descending about 1,500 feet per minute rate of descent, and landing about 145 miles per hour. And you got your engines running. When we come back from space, we have no fuel on board, so a big 220,000-pound glider coming back 7 times steeper and 10 times faster than you're coming down in a commercial airplane. So incredibly more demanding task. We train for it in a lot of computer simulations. We also have basically an airborne simulator called the Shuttle Training Aircraft. It's a modified Gulfstream II business jet. We modify the cockpit so the controls and displays are the same things you have in the cockpit of the orbiter. How do you make that business jet fly an incredibly dynamic approach? 21-degree glide slope, 15,000 feet per minute to descent. Take it up to 30,000 feet, put the main landing gear down, put both engines in full reverse thrust that increases the drag on the airplane, allows you to fly that same dynamic approach. Everybody who's ever landed the orbiter, minimum 1,000 approaches in the shuttle training aircraft in order to certify. All that training comes together as the shuttle is being assembled inside the vehicle assembly building on top of the mobile launch platform. In the background, you see the big orange external tank. That holds 550,000 gallons of fuel, liquid oxygen, liquid hydrogen. We feed into the shuttle main engines. We feed that through 17-inch feed lines. Incredible amount of fuel flowing into there. The external tank is the only part we don't reutilize. We actually jettison that on the edge of space. It burns up as it re-enters the Earth's atmosphere. On either side, the solid rocket motors, that actually provides most of the power, or what we call thrust, to get you off the planet. Remember, you're lifting off 5 million pounds of weight. So you need more thrust than you have weight. So about 7 million pounds of thrust, almost 6 million on those 2 solid rocket boosters. They only burn for 2 minutes and 10 seconds, and then they're jettisoned off. NASA actually recycles. Parachutes come out, they land in the ocean about 175 miles off the coast. They have ships out there that pick them up and bring them back and reuse them. And then the orbiter vehicle itself, about the same size as a small airline. The crew cockpit up here, a 60-foot long POV, and aft engine compartment. All that comes together 30 days or so before launch. They take the shuttle out to the pad and go through the final checks to make sure everything's operating properly. The crew comes down here to the Cape and goes through our final couple of days of preparation. Right before the morning of launch, we'd actually gotten up about 3 o'clock in the morning for what we thought was going to be an 8 o'clock launch. We got dressed in our launch and entry suits. Now, up until the time the Challenger actually crews launched in these military-style flight suits, like the one I'm wearing, this is comfortable, not safe. We realized we needed to improve the safety. Full pressure suit, safe, not comfortable. About 100 pounds of weight when you put that together. And remember, the shuttle is vertical on the pad, so you're lying on the back. So you're like taking the chairs that you're in right now, tilting them 90 degrees backwards, and then putting 100 pounds of weight on top of you. So let's just see. So how much do you weigh? Round numbers. 80 pounds. Oh, I will just round them. We'll say you weigh 100 pounds. And you're wearing a 100-pound suit. Okay, so that's 200 pounds, right? Now, when you take off, the acceleration is 3 times the force of gravity. So that number is multiplied by 3. So your 200 pounds is now 600 pounds. So it feels like you're being pushed back in your seat. You're very, very tightly strapped in. So So very, very dynamic ride. Normally, once you get strapped in, of course, you're laying there on your back because the shuttle's vertical on the mat. You're in that position for about 2.5 hours before launch. Not so for my flight. We'd gotten out there, got strapped in, everything was going fine. 15 minutes before the launch, they gave us a call, said thunderstorms have moved into the area. If there's lightning within 25 miles of the spaceport, we will not launch. I and I spent a little over 6 hours on our backs in the vehicle. And I'll tell you what, there was a period during that time I really wish I hadn't had 2 cups of coffee for breakfast that morning. But fortunately, the weather did clear, and we got to go for launch. Now, at this point in time, everything is on the internal computers, so there's actually no human actually in the loop to change things. These sparklers, there's no one finding the face of the vehicle, and then something ended tonight. 6 minutes before liftoff, it's already seen the vibration starting to build up. Everything looks good, the computer sends a command, pulls them over to his licensed solid rocket boosters, and gets 5 million pounds of mass taken off of 7 million pounds of motion. Tremendously dynamic inside the cockpit. In fact, even though you're accelerated 3 times the force of gravity, what I remember most is that tremendous vibration, just shaking back and forth. Of course, you've got to be concentrating on those instruments and gauges, because if something goes wrong at this point, you may have just seconds in order to recognize the problem, make the decision, confirm it with mission control, and then bring up the backup system. We did that routinely. Both of my flights, we had failures during that first 3 minutes of flight. 2 minutes and 10 seconds in the flight. We're going to exhaust the fuel in those solid rocket boosters. They're going to get jettisoned off the sides, and then we're going to continue on, still accelerating at 3 times the force of gravity until we can reach our orbital velocity of 17,500 miles per hour. That's 25 times the speed of sound. We jettison away the external tank, again, it burns up, and we continue in the orbiter as we're now coasting around the planet. Think about that. You stop accelerating. I mean, intellectually, everybody understands that means you take your foot off the gas, so you stop accelerating. But since there's no gravity and no wind resistance, we maintain that 17,500 miles per hour as we circumnavigate the globe every 90 minutes, seeing 45 minutes of daylight and 45 minutes of darkness as we go completely around the world every 90 minutes. Get out of those heavy launch and entry uniforms into our on-orbit gear, just polo shirts and trousers. But I'll tell you what, the best part of the flight, you can't wait till you do it. As soon as you feel comfortable, you take off your helmet, float over the window, take a look outside. In this case, we're coming across the coastline. I'll point out a couple things. One is just a beautiful view, and of course, you're 200 miles in space and looking out at the slant range. You can see some 60-70% of the Earth's surface up there. And you can see big geographical features. We're actually here at the Kennedy Space Center. Here's Tampa Bay over here, Miami Beach, and the Keys down here. So you can see big geographical features. But to spell a rumor, no, you cannot see the Great Wall of China from space with the naked eye. Again, man-made structures you cannot see unless you have some sort of enhancement, but an absolutely fantastic view as you're flying around. And we have to eat while we're up there. We can't cook on board the shuttle, so all of our food is prepared, either thermostabilized or freeze-dried food. Military guys recognize MREs, pretty much the same stuff. But we get creative with it sometimes. In this case, using some instant scrambled eggs or ever-present hot sauce and making like a breakfast taco. Here's a question for you. You can see we're using alligator clips and Velcro there to hold that taco in place. What holds the food on the tortilla? Go ahead.
Maybe something that has gravity?
There's no gravity. That's the key to it. There is no gravity. So I'll cut to the chase. What happens is, as long as there is moisture in the food, is something in there that has moisture in it, the molecules will tend to stick together. Foods that are problematic are things like cookies or crackers, anything that would crumble. This is what happens when it crumbles. The crumbs drop the floor and the dogs get them? No, they float around the environment. How about salt and pepper?
No.
Liquid salt and pepper. Why? Because if you had granular salt and pepper, you would be a pollutant in your environment. So liquid salt and pepper. So we get pretty creative with things, and the food is really pretty good. My favorite happens to be this rehydratable shrimp cocktail. Get a package of freeze-dried shrimp and cocktail sauce. Tells you add 3 ounces of cold water, wait 10 minutes. That may not look that great, but I'll tell you what, I've spent $10 in restaurants or worse. Really, we're very, very busy up there. We plan on about a 16-hour workday. Things never go quite as well as you want. 16 to 18 hours of work, and then we enter what we call our sleep period. Now, I didn't call it nighttime. I've already told you why I didn't call it nighttime. nighttime. You go around the Earth every 90 minutes, so every orbit you have 45 minutes of daylight and 45 minutes of nighttime. And so because there is some sun coming in the windows, crew members wear these sleep masks so the sunlight doesn't wake them up. And remember, you're weightless, so does it make any difference? Is this guy standing on his head?
No.
Not really, no. He's just upside down. There's no gravity, so he doesn't feel like he's standing on his head. He doesn't feel like he's sideways. That funny arm position is what we call neutral body posture. It's just, if you jump into a swimming pool and let yourself relax your arms, you'll do the same sort of thing. Neutral body posture. Now, I'm one of a handful of astronauts. I actually like to free float to sleep. For one thing, I'm also, and you'll probably figure this out, I'm a type A personality. So when the rest of the crew was down on the middeck sleeping, that left me the whole flight deck. I turned down the lights, nobody's talking to me from the ground. I could float in front of the windows and just take pictures and look out the window to my heart's content. When I finally got tired, I'd just fold my arms and float to sleep. It's like the world's greatest air mattress. Now there was one hazard associated with it. It's why most crew members like to use the sleep restraints. There is airflow inside the orbiter. You have to keep the air circulating. And so when you're floating there, once you drift off to sleep, the airflow will probably move you around the cockpit. And you may start out in front of the front windows and end up upside down in the back window hitting your head on something. It didn't bother me at all. I just go back to sleep. Now before I go to the next slide, I'm going to, remember we talked a little bit about human physiology, some of the things that happen to you. Well, from my standpoint, one of the truly amazing things about being up there in space is in general, your body works the same way in space as it does here on Earth. So all the kind of normal things that you do, eating, chewing, swallowing, digesting, and eliminating, going to the bathroom, your body all does that the same way in space. And I bring that up because, sometimes you think, well, you have to kind of, when you're swallowing, you have to kind of gulp things down. No, you just swallow normally up there. Everything works the same way as far as your body is concerned. But when it is time to go to the bathroom, the facility has an issue with it. Now, it looks actually a lot like an airplane laboratory, if you've ever been on a commercial airline. There's a few more bells and whistles, but pretty much like an airplane laboratory. Both liquid waste collection, solid waste collection. It works pretty well. What we do, what's missing from the equation? Gravity. There's no gravity. Nothing's going to flow downhill by its own. So we have to use airflow to do for you in space what gravity does for you here on Earth. So inside there we have a motor that drives the fan, creates an airflow through the two collection devices. Pretty simple. Position yourself appropriately, turn the airflow on, urinate into the receptacle. The airflow entrains the liquid waste, carries it into wastewater tanks. Now on the shuttle, we actually dump the wastewater in space. On board the International Space Station, water is a precious commodity. So we take all of our wastewater and we convert it back into drinking water. And it's tested 6 times a day. Now, what do you think happens to the water that goes down your toilet? Where does that go? Does it disappear forever? No, it gets filtered by the processes that either at your sanitation department and it goes down through the soil, and eventually you essentially drink your wastewater. So we just accelerate the process. We do it basically chemically, and it's absolutely pure and tasteless. It's tested 6 times a day, and you're just fine until that one day you get your bottle of recycled wastewater, and you look at it, and a thought crosses your mind: who contributed? You ought not to think about things like that. So this is not the best part of space flight. The best part is looking out the window. Here's the satellite we carried on my first mission, the big tracking data relay satellite. Beautiful antennas, the solar panels. Bob has a solid rocket motor. We're 200 miles up. We ignited that solid rocket motor, took it up to what we call geosynchronous orbit, 22,500 miles out of space. Still there today. DoD flight, again, a very, very interesting mission. I really wish I could tell you about it because it has some really unique characteristics to it. But I told you they'd shoot me, so we won't do that. Canada does take on some significance that I couldn't have talked about at the time, but I can mention now, particularly for those that are old enough to remember the first Gulf War. We launched November 1990. Turns out the United States had very little in the way of overhead reconnaissance capabilities from airplanes, and so they asked us to use our handheld cameras, take as many pictures of Iraq as we could. Most of that information was classified. This one is not. This is Kuwait. You can see in November 1990 how the Kuwaiti troops had set fire to the Iraqi oil fields. As it turned out, by the way, the photos we brought back provided both the maps as well as the photo intelligence for Operation Desert Storm in the spring of 1991. My favorite picture from space, sunset. I've already given you a hint about this. Remember, you're going around the Earth every 90 minutes. 45 minutes of daylight, 45 minutes of darkness. You realize you get to see a sunrise and sunset every single time you the orbit of the planet. Absolutely incredible, beautiful. And what we have here, you can see the limb of the Earth bisecting the setting sun. That color spectrum in the background, that is the 400,000 feet of atmosphere that we have out. That's the sunlight reflecting off the atmosphere. And I'll tell you what, all of us, astronauts and cosmonauts alike, we enjoy the beauty of this home planet we live on. You realize what a fragile environment that is and how we need to do everything we can to protect it. Coming back out over the Indian Ocean, we're going to do our deorbit burn. Now we put all that energy getting up into space, laws of physics, we have to take the energy back out. We actually do what we call a deorbit burn that slows ourselves down, and we start to fall back towards the planet. As we enter that atmosphere of 300,000 feet, 400,000 feet, we actually use that atmosphere to slow us down. So as that hypersonic vehicle, still traveling over 17,000 miles per hour, hits the atmosphere, friction of the air molecules impacting that vehicle slow you down, but it also heats up the air, or the plasma as we call it, around temperatures on the surface of the orbiter between 2,800 and 3,400 degrees Fahrenheit as you descend back into getting ready for landing here at the 15,000-foot runway at the Kennedy Space Center. Of course, just the orbiter vehicle, and by itself, remember, there's no fuel on board, so a big 220,000-pound glider. This is what the commander is looking at as he's coming in for landing. Keep that triangle set on the circle. Airspeed on the left, altitude on the right foot. The overlay on top of the runway, you're coming out of the left-hand bank here. You get a pretty good appreciation here. You see a few clouds in the background of that 15,000 feet per minute rate of descent. You are really screaming back towards the planet. Now, as these two lines merge, airspeed on the left there, it's going to keep increasing to a little over 300 miles per hour. This huge flare, and you're going to pull the nose up in less than 15 seconds. You're going to slow down from over 300 miles per hour to your prescribed landing speed of 200 miles per hour, trying to set that big 220,000-pound glider down on the runway less than 1 foot per second rate of descent. And again, having practiced this a lot, the shuttle training aircraft 100% confident of doing that. Never had any real problems with landing. We use the drag chute as our primary deceleration device. Saves wear and tear on the gears and brakes. Kind of unique picture there as the shuttle is landing. You can see it reflected in the water alongside the runway. We're still flying the International Space Station. We're not going to take time to talk about the International Space Station, but I do want you to remember one thing. One is the size of a football field up there. We actually put those components inside the cargo bay of the space shuttle, took them up into space and connected them together. The Russian segment, the US and European and Japanese segments, solar panels, radiators, size of a football field up there in space. And it is the International Space Station. 15 different countries have collaborated to design, build, and operate that space station. And over 80 different nations on Earth are benefiting from the research that we're doing up there. Incredible scientific laboratory in space. We plan to continue getting there when the shuttle was retired by using what we call Project Constellation. That was the shuttle. Today, NASA is building what we call a space launch system, going away from the reusable aspect of the shuttle back to a different mission, different vehicle, something more like the moon rockets, but using some of our technology from the shuttle program. Instead of the orbiter, we'll go to a capsule much the same way we did during the Saturn V Apollo. So a completely different mission that we're planning for. Artist concept, we're actually in the process of not only designing but building and testing that vehicle. We may be able to launch unmanned as early as next year, and then manned mission shortly after that. So lots of activity going on in that field. The other exciting thing that's going on in the space program is something called a commercial space. Again, for those of you who like to go back and think a little bit from a historical perspective, think about aviation in the early 1900s. When aviation was started out as primarily a government program, transitioned into the private sector. That's what's happening in the space program today. Over a dozen different companies that are investing their own research and development dollars into getting into space. Two of them, SpaceX with their Crew Dragon, going with their Starliner, may be able to put astronauts up at the space station as early as next year. So an exciting past, but a very much more exciting future for those that are willing to dare mighty things. With that, I think we do have a couple of minutes for questions.
Anybody got a question?
If you have a question, raise your hand and Mark will come around.
Okay, we can only take a couple because you guys got to get to dinner, I guess, so do we. Okay, I'll tell you what, right here, you can be the first one. A few questions. Go ahead, tell him your question.
Do you like space?
Do I like space? Yeah, it's really neat. It's fun floating around up there, just being weightless, sure.
Ready?
When you have to go in the water with 300 pounds on you, how do you get back up? It's really heavy.
It is because you're neutrally buoyant, so it neutralizes the weight that you have attached to it, and you have support divers who help you to get out. There's always people around for safety purposes.
When did you ride the STS-29?
That was in March of 1989. Easy questions.
What do you think was the hardest part of your job when you were in space?
What was the hardest part of the job? This will surprise you, because we trained so hard on all the really technical things, being able to fly this ship and fix the problems that came up. The really hard part was day-to-day things like going to the bathroom, personal hygiene. Think about your dad when he shaves in the morning. Well, that's not too bad when you got a faucet there to rinse off your razor or whatever. Well, what do you do when you're up there? If you don't use electric razor, what happens to the whiskers? You float around, So anyway, bottom line, that going to the bathroom and all that, it was harder than anybody would have ever believed.
What does it feel like when you came down when you're back on Earth?
When you come back down, your body has gotten really, really used to that weightless condition. It's just become so natural feeling. And so when you get back into Earth, you feel like you're twice as heavy as when you started out. And I can remember, I was only out for 5 days, but still at that night, I was sitting in my seat, and I was supposed to get up and throw a switch, and I said, okay, I unstrapped my seat, and I'm going to get up. I'm going to get up. I can almost think of making my muscles move in order to be able to stand up and take those first steps. But fortunately, after only 5 days, I felt normal in about 30 minutes. But people out there for months at a time have a much more difficult problem. One of some funny things there so often, you'll find somebody who's been on the space station for a long period of time, and they'll go into their house talking, and they'll have a water glass there, and they'll go, they're used to not having that.
All right, we don't have time to take all the questions. We're going to take 2 more. Then we're all getting, I'm sorry, but we can only take 2. Here you go.
Because you're with the same people almost every day, do you ever get tired of them?
Matter of fact, you do. It's one of the things you have to learn to do. But yeah, and what really happens, and this is that's how, actually nobody's ever asked me that question exactly that way. So I'm going to pause on it for just a minute, because I'm sure we all face that in our daily lives, whether it's your classmates or friends and neighbors or whatever, and you can get tired. When you know that you have to work together,